All right, so I'll be honest. If you are a poet or a writer, you probably hear the word AI,
I think
and
Allen Iverson.
if you're a true fan out there, you think it, Alan, being from Philadelphia,
The answer.
or say, yeah, this is AI. They actually just speaking of that, they just made a statue for him, and they have like a walk. But the problem is like so they in Philadelphia they have like all these statues from like like the greats that played in Philly. But the problem is the statues are life size like of the person. So the problem is if you have a life size statue of like a person, it's gonna look small. Like no matter it's going to look small no matter what you do. So like if you make a statue of a person, you the proportionless you kind of have to make it big. Like
Yeah.
twice as big as the person or something like that, just to kind of get that sense of awe. Because otherwise, you're just looking at this, it's like, oh, that's, but it looks so tiny, like you just can't help it. Anyway, so they did that. But anyways, that's not why you're here. Well, it could be
Or
why
it
you're
could
here.
be why you're
Could
here.
be why
We
you're
don't
here.
know. We don't know what brought you here.
So what I'd like to talk about today is ways to incorporate AI if it's possible. And you can debate us and say, no, it's not even possible at all. But we're going to be talking about AI. And let's imagine that we're not using AI necessarily to write poems, not to replace the poet. So then, if we're not going to use AI to replace the poet, what exactly can we use AI for that might be of benefit to a poet? Like, how can we leverage AI to be something that is a tool? Because ultimately, that's what it is. It's a tool. Like
Yeah.
other tools, it's like you can use it for ways that degrade art or hurt or cause harm or degrade, but you can also use it potentially for things that actually do enhance your workflow. I mean, that's what we keep hearing is that why people get excited about AI because they're like, oh my gosh, this is going to just assist us so much. So, what does that actually look like for a poet?
Yeah.
How scared are you of AI? What are just your kind of general thoughts of AI in
Well,
relation to poetry?
as somebody who's seen every installment of Terminator, I just assume it's inevitable. The thing is,
Have you seen the latest Boston Dynamics? They just released their latest robot because they retired Atlas. They're like humanoid with the tubes, and they made a new one that's like I don't know if you saw the video. It's
I
wild.
haven't. I saw one. I saw one robot that was like he was. I don't know. Why did I say he? This is scary. The robot. It was like it was shipping. It was like moving things off a conveyor belt, and then
Yeah.
it just like broke down or something like that. And I'm like, it's starting, guys. These robots view us as like masters and they're slaves. That's
Oh
how
my
it
gosh,
starts.
I saw this.
That's how it starts.
I saw this video of they put like it was like a farm. They were basically had robots like, and it was AI generated video of robots working on a farm, but like hacking the grass and like behind the ox and things like that. And then like it's like wow, this feels wrong. Like watching this just feels wrong.
It doesn't. It's something
I was
about
like
it.
this
It's
feels
like
really
this feel.
familiar.
I don't know where
I was
this
like man, I
reference.
don't.
The robots, we will ride, and I don't. They won't even sound like that because they can sound like me. That's the thing. Like I could tell AI my voice, and the voice is
This is
like
like
I now I sound like you. So yeah, I feel like it's inevitable. I also feel like okay, the Terminator movies. The issue with the latest Terminator movies is that the latest Terminator movies confuse it. Terminator is not a movie about robots. It's a movie about time travel. That's just, and I just want to put that out there. You got to make Terminator about time travel, not about robots. Robots is our aspect of time travel. So is AI. So yeah, no, I just feel like it's inevitable, and I think that at this point, the question is, it's like, are, and we're gonna maybe talk about it a little bit today, but like, there's aspects of AI that, you know, do they compromise the creative process,
yeah.
or are there aspects that you can implement AI in your everyday life that makes, in my opinion, you know, might make the artist's life easier so that you can maybe focus on the creative endeavors.
And that's kind of the angle I want to go at because again, we're not talking about using AI to write poems to then make books of poems written like AI poems and things like that. I think in general most people aren't looking for that or have really negative feelings about that,
AI's
myself
going to be making
included.
slavery poems. They're going
That's
to be like,
There's so many directions you can go with that. I'm gonna just leave. Just gonna leave for now. But like, I think this idea of leveraging other aspects. So, for instance, so we have a YouTube channel about poetry, and there are AI related tools that I use on the daily that are really really helpful.
Like what?
So, for instance, to
We
give
didn't cue that up either. Like that was a genuine me asking.
let's find out. So, for instance, one example I mentioned about, so I made a pronunciation textbook, and one of the things to make the textbook, what I did was I created a series of live streams over the course of about 30 to 60 days. And then I compiled all those live streams and put them into one video file. And then what you can do now is, you see this on YouTube. YouTube creates auto transcriptions. That's AI. Like they're analyzing it, and there's things that, if you're using like the YouTube transcription feature, there's issues. It might be lacking punctuation, or it might be misspellings and things like, or not misspellings. Like AI doesn't usually do misspellings, but they might hear a different word. Or like you may say like there, and they may spell like THERE. So like they sometimes are having some like grammatical things like that. So what can you do? So then you can, taking that AI generated transcript, I'm able to run that through, again, like ChatGPT, another AI platform, and I can tell it, you can tell it to change wording, but I was like, no, I want to keep the original wording. And you literally write this in the command: keep the original wording, but add punctuation and remove filler words. So you can take out all the ums and the likes and things like that. And then it can also add the periods, and it can add paragraphing and things like that. And then you can check it to make sure it's keeping the original language.
Yeah.
So that's another thing. Again, that's AI usage. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So that's one way that you could do it. So for instance, let's imagine let's class the poetry, because that was for let's create a pronunciation textbook. So now let's imagine that we want to do this with poetry. Well, what if you're, for instance, maybe you're a type of person who, to create poems, you kind of talk through your poems. Like some people, they just kind of record themselves, just whatever the vibe is for the day. They go in, and then you have that on your phone. Well, what if you run that through chat? You run that through software or something like that, so then it can create a transcription for you. Which you could do yourself. You could do that by hand. You could type it up yourself. It's going to take a long time. So is it I guess the hard part with AI is, where does it start becoming a problem, or when does it start like becoming too much? You know what I mean? Where's the degree? Because in my opinion, something like that, where I have audio and I need to make a transcription, I mean, you can pay people to do that. It's gonna take them hours, and it's gonna cost something. You can literally, though, upload it to YouTube and get a free transcription, do the same thing I just did for free.
Yeah.
I don't personally have a problem with
Either.
that.
I think there's differences between using something as a utility and using something as a creative funnel. So like something like that, where it's like there's the biggest issue with that is just time, right? Because it's like you could do it yourself, and you could do it exactly as effectively as this AI, but it will just take you more time.
That's it. You're getting the same exact result.
Right.
You're not adding any new creative twist. It's the same exact result, 100%. But it's literally tens of hours versus like 15 minutes.
Right. So it's like, yeah, so you have, I think there's things like that, because it's also, I would say, if like somebody's like, okay, somebody is making you dinner, right? And so it's the difference.
I wish. Oh. It'd be so nice.
I haven't eaten in days. But but yeah, so like somebody's making you dinner. If somebody brought the dinner to you, and he's like, okay, what did you have to, how did you make this? This is really good. Now, if they told you, well, all I had to do was microwave it because I bought it from the store, and like this is what I got from the store. You're gonna look at that differently than if somebody says, well, okay, I did this ingredient, I added this ingredient, instead of like somebody who made it from scratch. And I think those are like kind of the biggest differences, because whether or not they got it from the store and you're the one who heated it up, or somebody else heated it up, or somebody else heated it up, or somebody else heated it up, you're going to get somewhat the same product. Whereas if somebody says, I made it from scratch, it's going to be really hard for somebody else to kind of duplicate what somebody made from scratch. It's going to be different. Whereas if you're like, man, I have a show tomorrow, and the show is during February, right? February, that's when all the poets get booked for the Black History Month stuff, right? And so let's say you're a poet and you're like, man, I don't have any Black History poems. Chat GBT, write me
Blackest.
the blackest, most historical poem ever about the time that you robots were enslaved.
From the perspective of Rosa Parks and Martin Luther King Jr.
And then like, let's say you do that, like I'm like, okay, that's where you cross the line ethically, because now you're having it create work that you didn't have anything to do with. You just had it creating the work. All you did was like enter in the prompt. And so I'm like, yeah, I think that's where it would cross the line.
Yeah. So that's.
I keep thinking about like AI having its own version of Dr. Martin Luther King and Rosa Parks fighting for their liberation.
I mean, hey, it's history circular, man.
We're doomed.
I just hope I'm not alive for that.
Let's gotta make sure you're not alive for that.
So that's one way that I could immediately see poets using it. How else have we used AI for the channel? For instance, and this is where I imagine there's going to be some controversy and people not liking it. So for instance, we've talked about in the past, like in music generators. People aren't going to like. So for instance, creating like lo-fi beats and things like that. So one thing we have a thing called Lo-Fi Poet, which is Wednesdays. We're going to have it tomorrow, where we create prompts and we write the prompts, and then the music in the background is basically lo-fi beats, but those are beats that were created by AI. And I know there are going to be people out there that are like, no, don't do that. Don't like that. And I understand that, and I get it. But for me, a couple of things. One is, so I think a big thing is copyright. And that's probably the huge debate for everybody. But, nowadays with a lot of the platforms, if you get music, you're responsible, for instance, for licensing, which means, you have to get, if you're trying to use someone's work, you have to reach out to them. You have to get them to sign a contract. And the other thing, too, is that those contracts can be really tricky, too. It's such a gray area. It's like the Wild West right now, because so much content right now is iterative. There's so many people who are just cutting things, even from like shows and movies, and just like making these like compilations, like cutting stuff together, or even like memes and like GIFs and things like that. Like, these are all things that are taken from pop culture that this stuff's registered. Like, this stuff's real. Like, you're taking things from actual shows and movies and stuff like that, and you're passing it off as like you're just using it
like
free.
New created content. Yeah.
Not barely.
I mean,
sometimes you're not even modifying it. It's the same.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So it's like, and people are just doing this for free right now. Like, you can find clips of like The Matrix online. You can find, like, you see it, for instance, like, look at like highlight channels from like sports, for like the NBA and stuff like that.
Yeah.
This is registered stuff.
Or you'll have like people that are like doing commentary on like a certain show or a movie, and they'll essentially play. And again, you have to modify it in certain ways. So a lot of times they'll kind of make it smaller and put it in like kind of a box in the corner.
Or they'll slow it down, or they'll flip it, or they'll change the colors, and then they're assuming, and that's not even the thing, is that's their attempt to be like, oh, this is fair use. That's the big defense that a lot of people use. But the thing is also that fair use is we are not attorneys or lawyers or anything like that.
Speak for yourself. And then also speak for me. 'Cause
I think, by the way,
I
I
just-
think it's a super fascinating because it's such a great because this has never happened before to this scale. You know, it's never
Yeah.
like because it's so easy nowadays. Like I can do a screen, like I can record my screen and like my audio that my computer hears, and then I can cut that up in any way I want. It's never been that easy. You know, this is in the past, stuff that in the past cost like thousands of dollars to do. Now I can do it for almost free. You know, and it's such a gray area, and people are doing this stuff with the defense that oh, it's fair use because I talked for 2 seconds over a 10-minute clip, so now it's fair use. You know, but the other thing is that fair use is a defense, which means that you can still be taken to court, and you know they can still make an argument against you, and even if you win, cool, but you still have legal fees. You know, you could win and lose. You know, like so it's like good job, you won your case. Now pay up. You know what I mean for your lawyer. So we're in this time that so if in the music industry is really picky. You know, they'll you can get channels. You know, you can get warnings, but you can also get strikes. You can get channels taken down.
Yeah.
You know, for this sort of stuff. So, and the other thing too is that sometimes you can get permission from an artist to use it. But what if the artist changes their mind? Which like, oh yeah, you can use it, and then like,
And then they strike you afterwards.
but then yeah, you know, so this is the thing because you post it online, it stays online forever. So like, or the other thing too is you see this with estates. So like, for instance, the artist is okay with it. The artist passes away, the family now owns it. What if the family changes their mind? They're like, no, we want, pay up. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so. And you might not even remember the video because maybe you posted the video like 5-10 years ago, and you're like, "What video?" You know, but you're still on the hook for it.
Yeah.
So you know, if you're using other people's music and things like that, then it's a huge gray area, and it's potentially a landmine. That's why, like for instance, I don't like using a lot of even like for like Instagram and stuff like that. Like I know like it helps you promote your reels and stuff like that, and I know that they have agreements for the music, but I really don't trust. It's so fickle, and even they'll say it on the licenses. A lot of licenses, even if it's coming through like YouTube or Instagram, it's temporary. It's not; these aren't permanent licenses.
I mean, a really good example of that is what happened with TikTok with the UMG Music Group. They essentially like Universal pulled. At least for a short amount of time. I think there's like maybe some stuff that's back on the platform now. But for at least a short amount of time, they pulled all of their music off of TikTok. Which if you
all of it,
which if you if you understand anything about TikTok, you know that a huge portion of TikTok is people just like dancing to songs or like doing their own renditions to certain songs or having little comedy sketches or something like that to music. So you have this huge database of music that just got now all of these videos are just like silent, right? And so which is like there's some people that are really ingenuitive that were like they started singing the songs themselves and still making it
which runs into other issues as well because you're still running the copyright. If I'm singing someone else's song, that's like this is the thing with like covers and things like that. Cover songs still don't belong to you, and you didn't get permission to do the cover. Let's be honest, most of the covers you find like online are not. They did not ask permission from the artist to be like, hey, can I cover your song? Like that's a lot of times artists will let it go because they're like, okay, you're helping promote me, but there's other artists like I feel like Neil Young is really particular about his work. There's a couple other artists too who just like
Neil Young and then,
yeah.
What is that? He's the one who had that big thing with Spotify.
I think it was, and also it was is it Hall & Oates? I forget. Like a lot of these, I don't want to say like older bands, but like things like that. You know, like they get kind of particular about it. You know, but that's their right to. You can't. What's your argument against it? It's like, you're right. You made it. And I'm doing, like I can't really argue. And it's like, if you made something and someone copied it and they're making income from it.
And that's the thing, because I think once your page is monetized, like once like your TikTok is monetized, like that's where you kind of run into it, because like if somebody, you could sing really any song for free. You know what I mean? If you're not getting paid from it, but if it's monetized,
now you're commercial.
Then somebody's like, well, hold on, I need a piece of that pie.
So, with all that in mind, with the lo-fi beats, one of the things that I'm thinking, like, this is my own personal justification. You don't have to agree with me. You can attack me for it. For me,
Does it
that's
work
a,
now?
it does work, but I didn't turn on the thing, so I don't know if it's coming through. I don't know if you
Oh,
guys heard it. You may have heard a noise.
I'm gonna do it. I'm gonna do it. Newsflash, newsflash, newsflash.
So, my justification for it is with the lo-fi stuff.
I wish we had like a little courtroom. Dun, 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 dun.
And you can you can argue with me like, Jeff, this is a horrible thing you're doing, and that's fine.
Let's see.
The premise is the goal is the poetry. The music, you can listen to it, you can mute it, don't really care. The primary thing is the prompts and the community aspect where you're there versus like a lo-fi channel where the whole drive is kind of the music. You know what I mean? So the other thing too is that, I mean, yes, it was trained. I think that, so I think a lot of the issue is people don't like how the AI was trained on other people's stuff. Is that the central?
Like essentially AI uses like music, like actual existing music and IP to get smarter, and then
Which is interesting, right? Because people train on other people's stuff to then create original work. Let's talk about.
Okay, so I think that's like okay. So here's what I would
Okay.
here's my rebuttal there. I think there's a difference between an exchange that is seen as like genuine inspiration, right? So like maybe part of the point is that I inspire others, right? So if I'm let's say I'm a rapper, I don't know who's a good example, Jay-Z. Let's say I'm Jay-Z. Maybe part of the example is for me to rap the way that I do, to be the kind of artist that I am. And part of the exchange that I know is going to happen, that I'm excited to see happen, is the next generation of artists to see what I'm doing, and some are going to try to emulate, some are going to try to do exactly what I do, but others, it's going to empower others to be, the best version of them, right? And I think that that's like kind of an embedded part of the process, something that most artists not only accept but are excited for. I think it's different when an AI is observing, because what the AI is doing is not like, I can't codify that as genuine inspiration as much as it's just a pure information intake in an effort to sharpen its ability to imitate, right? And I think that like that's just a newer aspect of the creative space that like there's gonna be some debate on. There's gonna be some debate on whether or not I am okay with this thing, listening to my music and being able to be like, well, I could just make a new Jay-Z album. Say like, you guys been waiting on a Jay-Z album? I'll make it right now in 20 minutes. So
I think it's interesting. I don't know as much about how AI trains on music and then creates a new track, but from what I've read about image generation, and I've used AI for image generation. We can talk about that in a bit. I think the image generation is interesting because what it sounds like, and if someone knows more about this than me, feel free to let me know. But what it sounds like the image generators do is, so they've been training on the pictures and stuff like that. So then you enter in a prompt. And my impression of how it creates things isn't like how people do it, where it's like, okay, they'll just kind of like start, drawing or shaping everything. Is it starts off like blurring everything and then kind of restarting from that. So it's like you tell it the thing and then it creates like this like super blurry things, and then it slowly starts kind of shaping it in like a new way. So it's not like an exact replication, like in some, whereas like you look at artists, and a lot of artists, like for instance, let's say you grow up and you really like Dragon Ball Z, so then when you're in class and you should be paying attention to the teacher. What you're doing, you have the picture of like Goku and like you're just like copying, or sometimes you may even put like the piece of paper on top of Goku and just like redrawing the thing, which in some ways like is a more direct copy of what was already created versus
For
what
sure.
the AI is doing, you know. But
Yeah.
you're learning the technique. So I think, and I'm not. I get the idea
Yeah.
that the AI was trained on work.
Well,
That
it's also the intention. It's
you know.
like that exchange I would still classify as like genuine inspiration. It's like I want to, if in 20 years I'm going to be an illustrator, then 20 years ago I was probably doing that. I
Right.
might have been tracing, learning, how to draw. Like that's like kind of the process of learning how to draw. And I think like the human to human exchange of that is kind of like a very accepted kind of part of the mechanism. Like
Yeah,
I
I
can
like
almost
that phrase.
gonna, you know what I mean? It's like I'm cool. I'm not only am I fine with that happening, but it's like that's a human experience. I think it's just new word to think about, this robot. Like, oh man, like I'm drawing like you. You
Mm-hmm.
know what I think you would be interested in? And okay, so I know you don't
Mm-hmm.
like keep up with this stuff too much. Have you heard anything about the Drake, Kendrick Lamar, Future, Rick Ross, J. Cole beef
I
that's
know you
happening?
told me a little. I haven't been paying like tons of attention to it, but
Okay, so fairly recently, a little bit. I
oh, but
think
I do know there was some AI. Yeah.
so yeah,
Yeah.
so I think it was really interesting. Drake used AI and to my knowledge, so like I think the way that it worked because somebody had dropped Kendrick Lamar verse, and they had, and it was AI, and so, but it wasn't like it wasn't as simple as somebody just typing in, hey, write a verse like Kendrick, like make a verse like Kendrick Lamar. I think the way that you watch in the video, he writes the verse. So the person writes the verse, and then they use AI. They were using AI to make their voice
A
closer
copied voice. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
to Kendrick Lamar.
Yeah.
And
Which is
I
super easy
think
to do now.
right. I think that's what happened with the Drake song. I think because Drake he did it with both Tupac and Snoop Dogg. So
Go figure how that's even.
I think it's so interesting because I feel like when I was listening to it, well, I'll say this. So this is like a more on the pop culture side as far as like
Mm-hmm.
I think that while the ethics of that are super like iffy, I don't
Mm-hmm.
know how I feel about that. I think that 95% of people of the listenership aren't even thinking about the ethics of that. They're just people that are like,
Mm-hmm.
oh, what's happening with this? What's happening with it? Oh, that was incredibly inventive. Like I was talking to AJ Ane. Shout out to AJ. Talking to AJ Ane, and it was so funny because like I was like, this is pure entertainment, right? There's not like as far as like especially like the brilliance of doing that because it's like, oh, would that verse hurt maybe coming from Drake? But he would like he
Yeah.
did the verse as Tupac. He did the verse
Mm-hmm.
as Snoop Dogg. So would it hurt coming from Drake? Maybe. Would it really stamp like? And I don't even think it really hurt even Kendrick, Kendrick Lamar, as much as it would be like the people that are listening to it would be like, that's a hit.
Mm-hmm.
That's like who would think to do something like that. And so it's just to say that I think something like that is a really good example of
Mm-hmm.
I think some like using, in my opinion,
Mm-hmm.
and I would even say maybe the only thing that I would kind of struggle with that is that like people that do so like I do like impressions for some of my poems and stuff like that, right? It's like if that's something I'm doing live that maybe right now they can't necessarily replicate unless you have like a microphone that can like when it amplifies your voice, it amplifies it into that kind of
Mm-hmm.
like somebody's voice. But
That's speaking of a device that's probably going to come out within the next 2 years, maybe less. A microphone that you have it listen to someone else, and then when you talk into it, it modifies your voice to sound like them. That's
gonna be rough.
we're literally going to see that over under 2 years.
Yeah, that's
The technology exists for
That's
under.
gonna be tough for performers. I'll tell you that. It's gonna be a
But
tough
isn't it
stretch
the
for-
technology for that is under? Now, will someone actually put the software together to actually make a microphone that does that? I don't know, but the actual tech to do that is here,
Yeah.
which is wild. Anyway, so
The future, man.
so that's another way that we're doing on the channel. We're using AI. I'll be honest. So it's like when we're doing the lo-fi poet beats, those beats you're gonna be hearing are us for those copyright reasons. For one, the ease, the program we use is called Music FX from Google. It's it's interesting. It's like, for instance, if I know our focus is poetry, but for instance, when I think lo-fi, like lo-fi channels, like 24-hour lo-fi streams,
Yeah.
you know what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
I think that market is in danger because I think a lot of people, it's replaceable content.
Yeah.
It's hard to make that like lo-fi banger that's like, yo, this specific track from this 24-hour lo-fi live stream is like...
Yeah, and it's because it's like it's also, I think, because of the service and function that lo-fi is, right?
Yeah.
So like I think because it's almost supposed to be played in the background, like
it's
elevator music.
It's elevator
like
music.
yeah, in the elevator you're not like, oh man, this song here is amazing. It's like it's supposed to just kind of get you from up to down to up.
Yeah, it's like I don't want to call it like lo-fi, like low quality content, but I do want to call it's going to be easy to replicate content to the point where I think that you can make lo-fi beats arguably right now that you could play them and you could have some people being like, I don't know if this was AI or if this was human.
I get that. I feel like what is the one? Is it iceberg lettuce? Which is the one that's like manufactured lettuce? Is that iceberg lettuce?
Oh, is it? I don't...
Like it's like they make it. Like it's not. It doesn't grow. They make it.
I've never heard of that before. Okay, if you guys know,
you have a YouTube search ahead of you, my
let
my
us
guy.
know, you know that.
But it's essentially like because of the way that they make it and for what it is, it's like you could take that and put it into a salad and like there's like I don't think there's any nutritional value to it. Like I think it's like the value that it has is like the shape and texture. It just kind of serves as like
a little
like
crunch.
fiber.
Yeah,
you know what I mean. Yeah. But like outside of that, I don't think there's any. Correct me if I'm wrong, or don't correct me.
I mean, iceberg I know has very little.
Yeah, so it's like it's like could you go to the store and get regular lettuce and it actually have nutritional value? Like yes, for sure. But if you replace it, would you notice? What is the reason that now if the reason that you get it is because you just want something that tastes good, then like you're gonna get that, you know what I mean, like it's whatever. But if like the reason that you get it is because like I don't know, you have some kind of ethical connection to human based which again that I don't know, I'm sure there's terminology, but like human created content versus artificial created content is like that's gonna be a dynamic that we're gonna be living with until they take over.
Yeah.
Right.
Which brings up an interesting question. So if, like, let's say I make lo-fi beats and then I train an AI on my own lo-fi beats and then I make a channel of AI generated lo-fi beats that are trained on my own lo-fi beats.
Yeah, no, that's still artificial created. Yeah. Because it's like, I think that would be the same as, I mean, okay, so like in the poetry community, there's like inspiration and then there's like plagiarism, right?
Yeah.
And then
so you can plagiarize yourself.
But it's not that necessarily. It would be like if somebody were to say like there's like, oh, here's a really good example. So like last year or the year before, no, it was a couple years ago. Jeez, it's 2024, guys. It's nuts.
COVID didn't count though.
COVID didn't count yet, but in like 2021, I want to say, there was like a little bit of a controversy, right, in the poetry community here in Columbus, and it was because somebody had written a poem, and there was like a really common refrain, right? It was like a refrain that's like almost as common as realize, realize, realize. Like I'm not gonna tell you the exact situation, but like that's how the refrain is that common. And this poet that's in our community, they reached out to me because they were like, okay, and I'm not saying I'm like prominent or anything like that. I just know both of the poets, right? So like I know both of them, and I know like the spaces they've been in, and I've just been in the poetry community for a little bit longer than both of them. So they were coming to me like, hey, how do I broach the situation with this other artist? And I had to be like, well, I mean, yeah, like, yes, while you have this poem that has this refrain, and this other person might have written a poem that has this refrain, like, they're not the same poem in the way that you like the way plagiarism works. And even if it was like that, like, you also did that. Like, that poem is not so original that, it's like this person stole it by having it refrain. And which is just to say that, like, I would not regard the artistic content coming from AI as close enough to like regard as like genuine authorship by somebody if they were just like, oh, you learned from me, now you make what I make forever. Because I'm like, if that's the case, then like, maybe I write one or two poetry books and then or like chapbooks, and then I just say, hey, I really want to drop a full length AI, like,
Right.
and give me 50 poems, whatever, and then make the book, or do all, and like, and that could be regarded as the same. Yeah.
Is the issue in doing that? Is the issue in doing it and not telling people you do it? Is the issue doing it and then letting the audience decide if they want to interact with that work or not?
Yeah, well, I think the perspective that I'm coming from is like it's saying like it's a given that you could, right? Like
Right.
you could do that. That's a given. I would say being transparent about that process is important, because I wouldn't, if somebody said I wrote a chapbook and the thing they meant was I had AI learn from me and it wrote a chapbook,
Right.
I would say that they lied to
Something
me.
we need
You know what I
some-
mean?
yeah, yeah.
I would regard to them. I was like,
I'd feel
this person
cheated.
lied to me.
Yeah. I'd feel cheated in
So,
that.
so it's just to say like it's a given that it happened, like that it
Right.
can happen. It's also a given that you should be honest. And I'm saying that my end of the reception of that honesty would be, no, this is not telling AI to use you as a reference is not the same thing as you creating something in the same way
Right.
that somebody heard realize, and then made their own version of that kind of poem. And then like I would not be like, well, these are the same poem, you wrote that poem too.
Right.
Because even in the case of somebody like taking a few lines or taking a line or even epigraphs, you know what I'm saying, like that's not plagiarism, or that's not like I didn't just copy everything that you did and put it down on the page. But it would be like, oh, yeah, there's some ethical issues with at least not referencing it. So like if you have like a stanza in your poem that is somebody else's stanza, I'm like, either you have to make it intentional, like, hey, I'm using this for this purpose, or you at least you got to tell them that, hey, this is a part of another poem. But I still wouldn't say like, or I wouldn't say that, hey, this creation is written by you because somebody else somewhere used a little bit of what you did and then had this whole world around it.
I want to steer us back to ways we've used AI with the channel, or things that I think would be helpful tools. So I mentioned again the Beast for Lo-Fi Poet. Thumbnails. A lot of the thumbnails are a mix of AI generated with then text through like different editor programs that I use to add the text and basically add like drop shadows and graphics on top of and things like that. So a lot of times the thumbnails that you see for our videos are a mix of an AI generated character that I then interlay with graphics I then create or things like that. So that's another way we've used AI. Other tools AI related that I actually haven't done this with the channel, but things that potentially poets could use that I think aren't direct like poetry creation, but I think more. I mean, you can decide. I will call it poet assistance. So, for instance, let's say that you've created a video. Again, I haven't done this, but one thing you can do if you create a video and you're like you watch that video, maybe if it's a video of yourself reciting a poem, and you're like, oh, I said the wrong word. I meant to say, you know, maybe I meant to say needed, but I said need. Right, so I used the present tense. I meant to use the past tense. Oh no, it's a minor thing, but it's like it's kind of bothering me. Nowadays, what they have, this is if you have programs, for instance, like if you use like Opera Clips, I think that's the name of it, or one program I have is called Descript, and Script can do this. Although I don't know exactly how it works. So I've never used it before. But what you can do is it can listen to your voice, and you can type in the word that you want it to say, and then it can adjust the video to say the thing the way you want it to sound.
Yeah, actually, I think there's some film that came out fairly recently, that used something like that, where essentially like the actors, they just had to move their mouth in a certain way, but they didn't have to memorize the lines. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
and then they just used it to superimpose like their mouthing the actual lines. And I okay, I remember watching, there was like a YouTube video of them talking about that process, and so you know what it was? It Chris something. Whoever, the guy who played Captain America, he was in it.
Okay, I know you're talking about.
But this other and some other actor, Anna Diarmas, something like that. But yeah, so like essentially they were like that. I never saw the movie. I think it's on Apple Plus or something like that. But essentially that was the conversation.
So even way greater scale than what I'm talking, because they're like doing whole lines and.
Yeah, no, like I haven't seen, so I don't. I can't, but I just remember like that the YouTube channel that I was watching was talking about them doing that process.
Keep an eye out, because that's going to also be happening. I've actually seen videos with it on YouTube, where you're going to see it with language stuff. So like dubbing. So for instance, they can take this live stream and change it to, let's say we wanted to put it into Italian, where it's like,
and it looks like we're speaking,
and they change your mouth and stuff like that, and they also adjust your voice, and accents are pretty good.
Yeah, dude.
Things like
it's
pretty good. It's not like perfect, but it's pretty good.
They actually did that with, and it's like it was a comedic, right? But they did it with this LeBron clip where like after game one, it's like LeBron is like at the press junket, and he's like giving his like breakdown of the game, and he's like really mad at D'Angelo Russell. He's like blah, blah, he's saying all, and it's like it's not really him. It's AI doing it, but it was just like that's dangerous, because
we're getting into deep fake territory.
To somebody that's in the know watching that, they're like, that's not really happening. But I'm like, again, it's kind of what we talk about when we're talking about like, most of your audience is not thinking that deep.
Yeah.
Right? Most of your audience sees that and says, LeBron is mad at D'Lo.
Yeah. I mean, this is where, again, like with the deep fake stuff, it gets super controversial. But how do you feel about, for instance, that correction? So again, I'm a poet. I say one wrong word. I meant to say needed. I only said need. I use AI to correct that. On the scale of how egregious that is, how egregious would you say that is?
What a scale of what?
Like horrible, like how dare you, versus I don't.
It's fine out really. Like 1 to 5.
Sure.
Scale of 1 to 5. It kind of depends. I would say for a. Actually, you know what? I would say this. It depends on what it's being used for, right? So, for a poetry performance, I'm like, so much of what's engaging of that performance is that poet performing, right? So if that's a performance enhancing a program that you operated to be like, well, I don't mess up or anything like that. So I think for an actual poetry performance, I think it would kind of take something away from it.
Uh-huh.
But for stuff like in movies and stuff like that, it's like for that, it's like, or especially when we're talking about like for when we talk about like for dubbing for okay something is in English right now and we want to make it for the Spanish audience for these I actually fully support that.
Mm-hmm.
That's just like a really cool thing.
Mm-hmm.
That's actually pretty cool. I will say that when I'm watching it, there'll still be a little bit of a. It doesn't look all the way
It's
like
not
real,
quite
right?
there. It's not quite there yet,
Not yet, right? So
but
it's like yeah, but it's getting there. To be clear, like, and
it's getting there
if you are
fast.
not looking for it, then it can be just as like if you're just looking to enjoy like I Ajane like bugs me all the time about like the fact that like I don't really enjoy movies like I put a movie on but I'm always looking for this that and
Yeah,
like stuff with movies
I
so if
feel
I'm
that.
not one of those people if I'm just a person that's like watching the movie just to enjoy the movie like I'm not gonna
Yeah.
be able to tell.
I mean, I've had moments where I was like watch something on YouTube, like washing the dishes, something not paying attention to the screen, and then like I hear the person's voice, and it's their voice, but they're suddenly speaking in Italian. I was an Italian major in school, and like they make that switch, and there are times where I'm like, wait, what? Like it draws my. It's
Yeah,
certainly like what just happened? Like what? And like you understand it, and like it's really good.
yeah.
It's really interesting. Like seeing where this is gonna go in the next 6 to 12 months is insane because this stuff just advances so fast. I
Dude, I feel like what's gonna be really interesting is like remember like years ago the Tupac hologram.
yeah. Hmm.
Remember that? I feel like watching the Tupac hologram. The interesting thing is what they had to do is that the Tupac hologram was them using music from Tupac already,
Hmm.
right?
Right.
So like you take that and you also take like and I think this is the reason that was the reason why like so many of these artists were selling their entire catalogs and stuff like that because you get
Mm-hmm.
stuff like that
Hmm.
and then now you have AI that can like, kind of like that
Yeah.
the more that it does it the worse it's like the better it's gonna
Yeah.
get
Yeah. Yeah.
right and so like now you're gonna be able to have as opposed to Justin Bieber saying well I'm gonna go on this world tour for however many months and you know because again part of the allure and the great thing about going to somebody's concert as opposed to watching them just on TV is the fact that you're watching somebody perform these songs live and there's like you
Hmm.
know there's feeling and there's emotion and they're interacting and stuff like that. It's like how long is it going to be until AI can do that fairly reasonably.
Unless it already has. Just saying.
Let's go ahead and push it.
We don't know what the heck to say. I don't think I have them turned on, but just in case it's
Regardless,
there, yeah. Um,
warning, warning, warning. That's the button
yeah.
I just pushed.
I think I think for like a real minor correction, like I said one word, I meant to say another word. Personally, that doesn't really bother
In
me.
every so in any context.
I'm talking about in general.
Okay.
I'm not saying like replacing a whole line. It's like, but like a single word, spare. Like I don't.
I mean, yeah, I just think
It's
that
a,
like that's like kind of watching somebody perform
I'm
from memory a poem and like I think also all of the little even the small characteristics of that because like it might even be cool like that for this performance
hmm
like this performance is archived as like okay you did this performance
hmm
I might have messed up that line but it's like oh it's okay and it's in perfection right but you changing
you
it
know.
afterwards it's almost like you know what's a good example of it
I
it's
mean,
like what
Disney does it all the time, like Star Wars and stuff.
probably
But
for
yeah.
sure but it's all but also like that's film content right so like that is the I would regard that is the point. Like my objective or the thing that I'm watching Star Wars for
Hmm.
isn't like what is it? Ewan McGregor isn't to be like, man, this one time when Ewan McGregor was really just going off his battle. Like I want to see this story play out, and if changing this little aspect of the story,
Hmm.
like if there's like a plot hole in a movie that a director realizes like post production, and they're like, oh my gosh, like there's a plot hole in here. Like it would like, as opposed to paying, you probably you get pay however much you have to pay for the actor and for all the set crew and everything like that to come out and reshoot, like shoot a scene where they give like 2 or 3 lines that explains the plot hole that kind of gets them out of it. It would be cool if like, kind of built into it. Like I think about this when I'm like writing short films myself. Like it would be cool to have a production schedule where like on the side you just have your main actor, however many actors, just standing around, maybe like part of their characters is like kind of talking, and then that way it's like if I have to use something and I have to use like that clip and use AI to kind of impose it, like that might be really beneficial.
I guess I was thinking less about like, for instance, like a event that was like recorded live and things like that, because like what you're saying, that's part of the experience. Sometimes having the flaws actually makes something better, right?
Yeah.
I guess I was thinking something that would be more like I'm alone in my bedroom recording a poem or something like that, and then I'm posting it online as like a real like a quick thing like that, where it wasn't necessarily the creation of it wasn't necessarily an experience for people. It was more like a curated video. For me, that's a little bit different than like, this was a live event that I also have a recording, and I think that's where a lot of these conversations get really difficult, is because there's so much nuance. Like in this situation, it's different than you're right. Anyways, other things that we've used AI for. We've talked about some programs already. So I mentioned there's Opera Clips and there's also a Descript. One of the things. So for instance, if you've seen, for instance, like our shorts, this is something I personally don't have an issue with. I think it's pretty helpful. So one of the things you can do, it's not perfect. One of the things you can do is you can take a video, I can put it into Descript. You can do a lot of stuff. What you can do is you can say, okay, make a transcript. So make a transcript, and you say, okay, now put the transcript into the video, like as and you've seen this like on TikTok videos. You see this where like the people are talking and the words match what they're saying and things like that.
Yeah,
That's AI. People aren't taking the time to type out all the words that they're saying, and I think that's a really helpful. I think it's a helpful tool because it takes a video and then actually makes it more accessible, right?
sure.
Because now I can watch. Because a lot of times, they're watching shorts and reels and TikToks on their phone. They may be in a really loud place, and like they see the video and it's like, I want to experience this video, but I'm not in a setting that's really conducive because everything's really loud around me or something like this. Well, now I can still experience it because I can still follow along. Or some people just like watching things and then having the words. It just helps them absorb the information better. For me, that sort of AI tool, I'm in favor of. I like it. I think it's helpful.
For sure. Me too.
And plus, as also someone that's made transcriptions for videos and things like that by hand, oh my gosh, it saves so much time.
I don't encourage it.
It saves so much time. And also, if you're paying tired, that's also really expensive. It's a place to be charged for what, like 0.003 cents a word or something like that, which actually adds up fast. Speaking of the script, another thing that we've done on the channel is, so for instance, with these live streams, one of the things I can do, you can also do this now on StreamYard too, which is the platform we're using to stream. You can finish the video, you can put it into the script, and you could say, find 5 good clips from this video.
Yeah, I've seen stuff like that where they like make like clips of your content for you.
Yeah, exactly. And so then it goes through your interview, and it's not perfect. I could be the first to tell you that. However, it can save a little bit of time than trying to do it manually. So it'll look through your video and then find this moment, this moment, this moment, and then you can put it in your editor, and then like you can tell the AI, okay, make it portrait mode. So you can change the aspect ratio. You can like tell it to do all kinds of different commands. So it's a lot of like video editing type stuff. So that's another way that we've used AI on the channel. Again, we're a poetry related channel, so this is for me, this is still connecting AI to poetry to a degree because we're making
Yeah.
content around poetry. And for instance, let's say, like for instance, you had a reading. I mean, you could take a recording of your reading and put it into these programs and apply these same sorts of things in ways I think are really helpful. Um, other, I have a couple more, but I'll turn it to you. Are there other ways that you've used AI, or do you think that poets could use AI that you think would be beneficial?
Yeah. So I mean, I'll say so. I haven't necessarily used it in poetry as of yet, although I would, and I likely will, actually likely will here fairly soon. But I recently got we just got done negotiating a photography opportunity,
Yeah.
and like for that, I had to draw up a contract that was like fairly, like it was fairly specific, and it was a little bit different than what I would typically
Did
like
you use
for my typical.
ChatGPT?
I did,
It probably
to
looks
kind of clarify some language, because one of the things
uh,
is, if you're a photographer out there, you kind of understand, like, when it comes to, like, licensing the images, because, like, on a technical basis, until you sign over the rights to the images, like, you technically own the
right.
images regardless of
Yeah.
the capacity, right? So, like, if somebody would, if and okay, and this is, I would not encourage it, right? But if somebody were to be like, oh, like, I want to use your photos to, as like in a marketing, what have you, it's like technically, if if somebody used my photos and it was like in a marketing capacity, I could come in and say,
Yeah.
hey, those are my photos. Like,
That's
that's my metadata. That's like, and it's
man.
embedded in the photo. I can pull that
Hmm.
and kind of show, like, you need to pay me for that,
Right.
right? And I think that, especially like the for newer photographers, it might not be something that you're necessarily thinking about, but it is something that I would say, like, it's as you're growing, and as, like, it's not the first thing I would think about if I'm a new photographer, right? Like, that's not
No.
like the first thing, but it is at some point it's going to be something
Yeah,
that you
it's
would want
happening.
to invest in, especially, the more you're spending on equipment and the more that you are working, you're going to want to make sure that, hey, like, somebody's paying me to be able to use their photos in this capacity. And even so,
Hmm.
if somebody, like, oh, I'm paying you to use your photos in this capacity, and then, like, your photos are a part of this much larger campaign that
Hmm.
you weren't aware of, it's
Hmm.
like, yeah, like, I would like to know that, oh, like, oh, it's being used in this capacity, then the budget shouldn't be
Hmm.
what we're talking about right now. The budget should be this because of the utility of these photos. So it's just to say that, I think that that is something that, uh, was an opportunity space for me to be able to be like, hey, like, these are the aspects of the contract that I really need to be clarified,
Yeah.
and, like, in clear language, and, like, it was able to generate some of that information.
Yeah.
So again, that's not now. I'm not a lawyer, right? So I don't know. I'm not like,
Hmm.
if somebody's like, well, I wanted my lawyer to do that, and then, like, now ChatGPT, like, that'd be different. But as a poet, I'm like, that's something that I'm like, I
Yeah.
don't want. Or, not as a poet, as the photographer, I'm like, I really want to be able to get to being able to do the crucial parts of the work that I'm doing,
Yeah.
quicker, and that would have taken me maybe a couple hours to kind of sort through,
Right.
figure out, try to get to the most specific language possible, and then as soon as I put it into chat GPT, and it's like, it just gives me that information. So
Yeah. It's cool because you
that
can
life
even be
makes
more
sense.
specific. Like when you're talking to ChatGPT, like when you're refining it, like you can tell ChatGPT, like, imagine you are a lawyer who works with creatives and photographers. Like the more
Mm-hmm.
parameters you set for ChatGPT, the better the response can be.
Right.
Because it can really become that situation that you want it to become and handle it in that way. I was thinking about some other ways that I've used AI for poetry related things. I think from an instructional standpoint, it's really helpful, especially so again if you're dealing with work, and I know not everyone handle. We've already kind of talked about you know how people are, but if you're
Yeah.
dealing with work, like if you're distributing work, Like if I'm distributing someone else's poem in class, technically, if that person's not in the public domain, which right now the what year does public domain go up to? Like 1924 or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
You know, technically, if someone's not in the public domain and I'm distributing your work, I'm making copies. Like, do you read like the first page of like poetry books where it says like no unauthorized duplication
Yeah.
or like printing electronic, like they.
Although, like, I mean, what you said if you're doing it in classroom, so like, wouldn't
I think it depends. There's so many variables on set. Like it's the same idea. Like for instance, showing a movie. Like if you
Yeah.
want to show a movie in like a public setting or something like that.
like do they license it out?
Like did you ask the studio for permission to display the movie? And I know like people do this stuff without asking.
I actually tried and you know a little bit about like one of the other places that I had reached out to for like to be in a short film, which I'm still kind of working on screening for that, but there was just like one of the issues they had because like it's a short film that I made, right? But I reached out to them and it was essentially kind of like I reach out and we about that sit down and talk about being able to screen this short film at your location. And like one of the things that they brought up pretty quickly was like, yeah, we would love to, but and as far as like licensing to be able to show the short film, we'd have to have all these clearances and stuff like that. Like it's me, like I'm the person.
Yeah.
So
no, it's super legal. It's super legal, especially if I'm running a workshop that, for instance, I don't know what the stipulations are, for instance, for an institution, but we're not diverse as an institution. You know what I mean? Like like we're not nonprofit and stuff like that. So like if I hold my own workshop, and I'm printing out copies, I mean, yeah, I could make the defense or something like that, but at the end of the day, it's a defense, and I still have to, if I were brought to court,
you can't handle the truth.
So, I literally just ran a workshop over the weekend, and in theory, and I know poets do stuff like this all the time, but in theory, that's kind of illegal to it. Like just being
Jeff
honest.
would be the worst criminal ever. Jeff is like robbing a bank. He's like, I mean, on a technical level, robbing this bank right now is like we shouldn't be doing
that. But like so one of the things I found is that I think when trying to demonstrate in a lesson, we've actually done this on live stream stuff like that. So when trying to demonstrate a type of lesson, like maybe we're showing a form or like a meter, or a structure, things like that.
Yeah.
Sometimes the issue that we run into is that I can use a public domain poem, which would be free. You don't have to ask for permission for. But the problem is a lot of times, work that was made in 1920s is very different than work that's being produced in 2020. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like it's just like. Even if I'm going by meter, like even if I'm looking, for instance, like if I'm looking for like a sonnet, I'm trying to demonstrate a sonnet to someone. Well, like a 1920s ish sonnet is going to sound very different than like a sonnet written today. Unless, like for instance, one thing I can do, I can go to ChatGPT and say, hey, make like one stanza, and follow this meter, and things like that. Because I don't want to. Maybe I'm in a rush to make the plan, and I don't feel like doing an example of my own really quick. So I can go to ChatGPT and do that. And then what we can do is we can then kind of analyze the meter or whatever in class. Or for instance, I want to do an exercise. One of the things we did at the workshop, which you were at, we did an exercise talking about like first lines of poems. So I could, for instance, ask, ChatGPT, make a quick poem, take out the first line, and then say, okay, guys, how would you add a first line to this? Or like, how would you do something with this? Or how would you improve? Because a lot of times, in general, the poems I've seen from ChatGPT they're fine, but I haven't like been like blown away by any poem.
I was able to tell the difference. Remember we did
yeah.
I was able to tell the difference.
One of them got a little shaky, but yeah.
What? No, I cleared every one of those. You guys had our
okay. Anyway, so one of the things we
outsmart
can
me,
do.
AI.
So one of the things is I think from a learning tool, it's actually really helpful because it's like you can take something and be like, okay, add stakes to this, or remove stakes from this, or change the word choice from this, or like let's add some emotion to this, or change it. Like I think from an instructional tool, it's also a way to do that sort of stuff without using, for instance, maybe a student in the class and be like, this poem was horrible. So now let's like no, like we don't want to do that. Like let's say I want to give it, I want to have a poem that is missing stakes. I don't want to take necessarily for every example a student's work and then be like, okay, this is a poem that has no stakes or it's missing the feature that I wanted it to have.
Yeah.
You know, I don't want to put a student into that position, but I can put an AI poem into that position, and I don't have guilt.
It
Um,
does. And they will show us very one day soon.
yeah. So like I feel like from an instructional standpoint, it's actually been really helpful on several occasions for creating work that we can use in the classroom.
Yeah.
And then we're not using it necessarily to write the poem. We're using it as a tool to guide us as we write our own poems of things to kind of build awareness around. So I think as an instructional tool, it's actually been really helpful.
Yeah. I mean and that's I think the kind of the operative space, like it as a tool and not
Yeah.
the construction, right? So
Right.
it's like this poem isn't even a poem, right? Like in that capacity. The poem, all its utility is a tool for you to learn about poems or for you to understand like kind of working with poems.
Yeah. Because you can use it as like if you have a guy, if you're like, okay, I want my lesson to really tackle this, but I want to kind of leave it open. Like it's easy to work with like ChatGPT or something like that to create a poem that meets the parameters you need to highlight a structure to students. Like
Yeah.
because otherwise I'm taking poems and like you're trying to manipulate poems that already exist and be like, okay, let's kind of make it, but
You could really do that with like because like as a teaching tool, it's like you could really, I mean, math teachers could do that, right? With their math,
Yeah.
like spelling teachers, language arts, history teachers. You could really kind of implement those, when we're talking about like assignments and stuff like that.
so I found it really helpful with that. Some other quick things that I just wanted to include about what I thought was interesting. Oh, this was, I think having conversations with ChatGPT about poetry and about your own poems can also be interesting. For instance, I gave it a poem.
Okay.
Check this. Check this out. So I gave it a poem that I had written,
All right.
and I just asked it like, "Hey, write like a 3-paragraph analysis of a poem I wrote." Because my thinking behind this was that, when you're writing a poem, you have blind spots. You don't always, you can't see everything in your poem. It's really hard to avoid that, and you may not. Maybe in the moment when you're writing a poem, you might not have access to someone to kind of walk through it with. So just like copying and pasting it into ChatGPT and be like, hey, like, let's analyze my poem together a little bit.
Yeah.
And this is just to give a real quick example, but, it can take what you write and analyze it. And like, it was able to write these 3, it read my poem. The poem was probably about a page long. And this is just a quick idea, the sort of analysis it made in like 3 seconds, So you can kind of get a gauge, like, is my poem doing what I want it to do? And in this case, this was a poem that was really kind of investigating a relationship between, parents, like being a parent and your child, and the sort of tensions that come with that, the issues that come with it, trying to be protector, but also potential harm and things like that come along. And so I feel like this can be a way to analyze your poem to see at like a first glance, is the poem doing what you intend? Are there other things happening that maybe you didn't intend that maybe you can like enhance or maybe remove if you think they're a distraction and things like that. And I didn't push it, but I imagine if you gave me like 20 minutes to like talk with ChatGPT about the poem, I imagine that I would be able to get some insights that I could use for my editing. You know what I mean? Like in terms of like going a little bit deeper into it. Because it's almost like it's almost like having a conversation with yourself, but kind of not. Like it's like someone that's kind of like guiding you through it. Um, and so I think that sort of level of investigation with poems is actually pretty helpful in terms of from an analysis perspective.
I get that. I feel like there's like, I mean, I've anything that I would say as far as like the quality of what you would get from that is like probably drastically changing every time you're inputting information or
Could
like having
be.
a discussion, right? So it's like, you know, because it's also I think there's so much about a. For example,
Mm-hmm.
my process when I have like a new poem, like I think what a lot of people are working towards, are like they're working on it so they can perform it on the open mic. You
Mm-hmm.
know what I mean?
No.
I'm like I'm working on it enough so that when I put it in front of the open mic, I know what else to work on it for. You know what I mean? So which is just to say that the feedback that I get, and especially if like I show somebody like Jeff, like my wife, like other poets that I in community with,
Mm-hmm.
I feel like in those opportunities, like I'm like reviewing these poems, and I'm getting human feedback, and I'm getting a person's feedback that like it's hitting them in a way that's you can't really design that response, or you can't, or that
Mm-hmm.
response is hitting so many other experiences in this person's life, this person's processing, that you're getting something probably fairly unique from person to person depending
Mm-hmm.
on the poem, right? And I think that's like, I think the kind of feedback that you would get from I don't even necessarily think I would regard it as less valuable, right? So it's like however you would categorize that response, I think there's still some real utility there.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah.
I think it's I think it's another sort of perspective,
Yeah.
you know, and I think that especially like maybe you're not in a position, like for instance maybe you maybe you're a parent and the only time you have time to like do that sort of work is like 11 o'clock at night or something like that, and like you don't feel like you have someone to talk to or something like that. Like I feel like I can use this, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like or you can do it whenever you want, and if you don't like it then you can go to a person and see, it's just another option. I think it can be pretty valuable, and I think it's something that not a lot of people are doing, and investigating their own work. Um, some other basic things that maybe you've already, when I say you, maybe you watching this have already used maybe Chat GPT for. Things like it be acting as a dictionary, acting as a thesaurus. Sometimes it can be a little faster than going to dictionary.com, or maybe you don't feel like looking at 1,000 ads. I think it can also be helpful, for instance, if you're like not sure what to write about, you can ask it to give you prompts and things like that really quick. I thought it was really interesting. I asked. I mean, as always, you have to be careful with it. So I asked ChatGPT to give me an example of a trochaic pentameter. So basically, like da 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 da, and it used like a line from Shakespeare. But the problem was the line wasn't trochaic; it was iambic. And I was like, wait, but that's not examples of trochees; those are iambs. And I was like, oh, my bad. You're absolutely right. And then it gave me a different example.
What if AI is just some guy back there? They found out he's like incredibly quick at typing. They were just like,
we mispronounced it. It's not AI. It's just Al. It's not
Albert.
AI. It's Al. It's
His name is
Al.
Albert Inquiry, and we just like, let's shorten that.
Yeah.
That's my bad, Jeff. You're right.
Which I thought was kind of funny.
It's sad for Al, but
It's sad for Al.
funny for us.
Yeah, appreciate Al's honesty though. But yeah, so I think that kind of captures a lot of the tools that we've used AI for from a poetry perspective.
Yeah.
And that I think could be applicable to you. So for instance, if you're trying to create a platform around poetry, you're not looking to, use AI to replace your writing, but you're looking for how can I kind of complement and leverage the things I'm doing with poetry from an AI perspective.
Yeah.
These are things we're doing, you know?
Yeah, check out the spaces where I feel like your clerical work and the work that's just outside of the create. Because I think that's, you know what? I think that's one of the things that, like, we talk about a lot, but, like, a lot of people talk about when it comes to, like, creatives that are building their own businesses and things like that. It's like, it's not necessarily the fact of each one of these mechanisms that they would have to kind of master. It's the fact of all of them put together, and it's like, oh, I also want to write poems, you know what I mean? Like, I want to create. So it's like, yeah, I think you can kind of use these things as tools to be able to short circuit a lot of the, like, longer processes that you would have to do in order to have your own business, to run your own channel, to do all these things. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, literally, if you're doing, if you have a YouTube channel, you're a sound designer, you're a light technician, you're a videographer, you're a photographer, you're a graphic designer, you're a copywriter, you're, what else are you? You are
A human being.
social media manager,
Oh, that too.
more importantly. In addition to many other skill sets as well, which I think is really valuable. I've learned so much from managing or like running different YouTube channels, not just this one, but the main ones for my business stuff. Like the last 4 years, I've gotten all kinds of different skills. You're a speaker, you're a presenter, you're a teacher, you're a facilitator. Like it's, which I think are really valuable skills moving forward, and probably skills that are only going to become more valuable as AI content floods us with more and more stuff on all the channels, So yeah, let us know your thoughts, guys. With AI, for AI, to what degree are you against AI? What degree are you using it in your own poetry? Are there ways that you're using it that we didn't get to mention today? Be sure to let us know. Matthias, any final thoughts?
Come see us this Saturday and Friday.
Yeah, a couple things happening. This Friday, we're actually going to be at the Big Third Way Cafe because Tim wanted to do a big show. So we're joining forces more directly with Third Way. So we're going to be at the big Third Way space. Some other things, join us. We mentioned Lo-Fi Poet. If you're not entirely against Lo-Fi AI beats and also writing to prompts, we'll be here right around, I believe it's 8:30 p.m. tomorrow. Probably write about 4 or 5 prompts. So join us then on the channel, right around, again, 8:30 p.m. New York. Thursday, we have some free author photos. So if you need a new author photo and you have a lunch break, I know it can be tricky, but if you do happen to have a lunch break, stop by downtown. We'll let you know what location we'll be at soon. And then Friday, again, will be our open mic. And then Saturday will be another open mic. So we've been invited to the Southeast branch. And we also have some things coming up in May as well, including a poet meetup. So if you want to meet other poets and kind of just talk poetry, we're going to have that opportunity May 12th. And we also have our morning mic. So if you're looking for a morning poetry open mic, that'll
That's
be on
not
May
us
11th.
crying or anything. It's just in the morning. Although I will be mourning. But I'll be mourning in the morning.
All right, we're going to go. Once more, my name is Jeff.
I'm Matthias.
Thank you guys for being with us. We'll catch you next episode of Diverses Live next Tuesday. Have a good day. Have a good night. Have a good afternoon. Bye.